If I seem a little slap happy, it's because I went to camp yesterday. We, for those of you who do not know, own and operate a residential Jewish summer camp in Prescott called Camp Harry and Daisy Stein, or Daisy and Harry Stein. I think Daisy is much, more important than, what I'm saying is Camp Stein. And I was there last night. I got 4 hours of sleep. I came back so that I could be here with you lovely people. Who would want to stay up in the altitude in the pines for Shabbat? Pshh, I'd rather be with you. But our administrative staff, which is our senior team, is assembled. They're orientating themselves, and we had some wonderful conversations. And our new camp director, Leah Zigman, is up there running the show, and I am so thrilled for our admin team and our campers that she is there. One of the things that we talked about last night was the idea of empathy and what empathy means versus what sympathy means, and how, as Jews, we have it seems a common thread that we were, many of us, raised in homes. Maybe I'm speaking for myself, maybe not. Many of us were raised in homes when we were feeling pain or feeling anxiety or feeling stress or feeling hurt. Our parents would say, don't feel that way, right? Because either they couldn't handle seeing us stressed out, and so they would say, don't feel that way because they themselves didn't want to experience that as our parents, or because that's how they were raised, or because there is a certain element of human nature when someone is feeling sad or feeling bad that we almost take a defensive posture and do sort of this artificial sympathy thing where we say, sorry you're feeling that way, don't feel that way. It's sort of like before a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah becomes bar bat mitzvah, when we're assembled in my office signing the certificates, and I'm trying to keep the shtick going so that things are loose, and someone will invariably say to the bar bat mitzvah, who is sitting there stiff as a board, looking like they haven't breathed in 3 minutes, nervous, and says, don't be nervous. That's not empathy. That's the exact opposite of empathy. That is trying to... It's not healthy. It's not a healthy suggestion to tell someone who is nervous to not be nervous. So we talked about that last night, and how with campers and staff, empathy wins the day when the choice is given. When someone's having a hard time, how it is that we can try to put ourselves in their shoes and try to express to them that we understand on some level that they are feeling sad, anxious, or whatever it is. Then this morning, I was happy to lead a session with our admin staff on the topic of the Dr. Dweck's idea of mindset. Mindset being this psychology of how you think about things and where you, of course, set your mind will enable you to make it through tough decisions, tough choices, and otherwise circumstances that are challenging. And there are, of course, according to Dweck, the two types of mindsets. There is the person who has a fixed mindset, which is someone who is pretty conservative, does not like taking risks, doesn't really like going beyond a certain point in the way that they approach a problem. And then those of a more, what she describes as a more open, if you will, mindset. Someone who takes risks and works through hard problems differently. And I'm blanking on what it is called, the fixed mindset and the, what? The growth mindset, right. So in a business sense or in economics, the founders of Facebook and Google and Apple are growth mindset people, and the fixed mindset people who are the ones who run the business, right? You need a certain creative, free-thinking, open-minded person to come up with such an idea, as we're going to have people post pictures of themselves online and make very narcissistic comments about themselves, but they don't know how to run the business. So let's get the people over here who are not as risk-takey to run the business. Creative people come up with the ideas, more conservative or fixed mindset people. And by the way, I'm not making judgments. You need both in order for society to exist. Well, this idea of growth mindset and fixed mindset and openness and closeness or defensive postures all comes up in this week's Parsha. I know you were wondering, when is he going to sneak in a little Torah? Well, Naso has really interesting, I wouldn't say rules, but instructions for Moses to give the people regarding how we apologize. So this morning I spent a lot of time talking about how we praise kids, how we give our counselors praise, how we give our campers praise, and talked a lot about how we should get away from the general praise categories that we use with kids. When a kid comes home with a piece of artwork and it's really nothing other than scribbles on a page, don't say, "Oh, that's beautiful," because you're lying to them. Right? It's not beautiful. It's a mishmash of lines. Rather, focused praise, what Dweck calls focused praise at least, is about saying, "Oh, I see you used red." To a child, that's praise. And because it's a focused kind of praise on one basic thing, and you're not lying, by the way, kind of important when you're praising someone not to lie to them, you're saying you used red. And a kid interprets that as praise, and it's a win-win. Moses is talking in this week's Torah portion, juxtaposed to praise, about apologies, saying we're sorry or how we go through this process of apologizing. So here's what the Torah says from Naso, and this comes from Numbers 5, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this more extensively tomorrow morning at Torah study, so you should come join us. This is Numbers 5, verses 5 through 8. Adonai speaks to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say the following." You know, the altitude, I got very parched. It was so beautiful at camp. Oh, we should just do services up there one time, yes? Oh, yes. All right, I'll call Leah after Shabbat and tell her we're all coming next week. Let's see how that goes over. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites. When a man or a woman commits any wrongdoing toward another person, to a fellow man or woman, thus breaking faith with God," interesting, it's sort of as if saying when you do something wrong to someone, it's also an affront to God, "and that person realizes his guilt, he shall confess the wrong that he has done. He shall make restitution in the principal amount and add 1/5 to it, giving it to him whom he has wronged. If a man has no kinsman to whom restitution can be made, the amount repaid shall go to God through the Kohen, through the priest, in addition to the ram of expiation, the ram of forgiveness, if you will, the sacrifice of offering of sin, with which expiation is made on his behalf." Now, forget about the ram. We don't do the ram thing anymore. We haven't done it for 2,000 years. Let's focus on that first part just for a second. And I think you'll understand not the juxtaposition, but the similarity between what I was talking about, you weren't there, this morning about focused praise and focused apologies. Imagine, if you will, that we had two different mindsets. We're going to have a growth mindset when it comes to apologizing now from what we learned in Naso. Number one is, when we commit any kind of a wrongdoing, we're going to see it as also breaking faith with God. That is to say that we are going to not just own or take responsibility for what it is that we did toward another person, but we're also going to see it as an affront to God. Why? Tselem Elohim. Every person is created in the image of God, and so when we do something wrong to someone or say something wrong or offend someone or hurt their feelings, and this is, I want to say in context, it has a little bit more to do also about damage to someone's property or to someone's goats or herds or things like that too. It's both, if you will, torts. It's about torts. You know, general business wrongdoing is in this category too. But basically, this is about damages to a person. See it as an affront to God. The person is created in the image of God. You have also committed a sin, done something wrong to God. Then imagine, this is number two for the growth mindset or the focused apology, you have to actually confess the wrongdoing. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know too many people who on let's say, first try for the apology, let's say with a spouse, will actually confess to what it is that the wrongdoing was on the first attempt. People say, I'm sorry all the time. It's become sort of impulsive. And, excuse me, this is going to be a little provocative. It's become a little meaningless. I mean, we say it a lot. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But imagine if what you really did was to say to your spouse, to your child, to your friend, this is what I did. I understand. This is a confession, by the way. This is later on in the Talmud, how they flesh out for us what a confession looks like and sounds like. This is what I did. I know that I did it. I'm sorry that I did it. It must have made you feel terrible. That makes me feel terrible. And then I'm sorry. Imagine if, do you know anyone who does that on a regular basis? Of course not. It's easier just to say, I'm sorry, even if you're not. But according to the Torah, that doesn't work. That's no different than telling the kid with the ugly piece of art that it's beautiful. What happens when we do this to people, by the way? When we continually tell our children words of praise that aren't true? What happens when they get into the real world and someone doesn't praise them? Or even worse, someone tells them the truth and tells them their work isn't that beautiful. What happens to them? It can be spirit-crushing. The same goes for apologies. A very blasé apology not only doesn't count, but it can even be more hurtful to someone because they don't feel heard or understood. They don't feel your empathy. The Torah says explicitly, when you realize your guilt, confess the wrong that you have done, and then you make restitution, and then, spoiler alert, you give even more, which is to say, make your apology above and beyond. That's how you make it right. It's a fascinating concept, and it's a wonderful Torah portion. There are so many other things that are we have the Nazirite laws, which we're going to learn about tomorrow morning. The priestly benediction is in this Torah portion. I suggest you mosey on over to Torah study at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we can touch on some of those other things, but we're going to spend more time on focused praise, but more importantly, focused apologies. Focusing on how it is that we say we are sorry, and what it is that we say when we say that are sorry that is so critical, so important to bringing healing to ourselves, to our family, and ultimately to God. Shabbat Shalom.